we shouldn't be surprised if the temptations that Satan launches against Jesus are the same temptations that he launches against us. We shouldn't be surprised that when Jesus comes to this earth and Satan attacks him, tempts him, that it's the same way that he attacks us and tempts us. This week, I want to wrestle with the appearance of Satan clearly in Matthew's gospel, and then the subtle ways that he appears throughout it, centered on a single temptation, a single issue that he is constantly attacking Jesus with. We see the temptation as a part of the third temptation in Matthew chapter 4. Matthew chapter 4, you have the three temptations of Jesus in the wilderness. He's been there for 40 days. And I believe that all three temptations are actually targeting a single something. But I think you can see it most clear in the third one. Matthew chapter 4, verse 8. Again, the devil took Jesus to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. All this I will give you, Satan said, if you will just bow down and worship me. Now, this is a very shrewd temptation because you see, Satan knew that Jesus came here to establish a kingdom. I mean, Matthew chapter 4, verse 17, that's exactly what Jesus will be announcing when his ministry is launched. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near. Jesus came to establish a kingdom, and this is something that Matthew's gospel emphasizes over and over and over again. And so here in the third temptation, Satan says, I will give you exactly what you've come here for. All the kingdoms of the earth. The kingdom you're looking for, I will give it to you. Just bow down and worship me. And I think that Satan had the ability to give Jesus that authority. Why? Because everything that was trusted to humanity in the garden, we handed over to Satan. And we were entrusted with dominion over the entire earth. And at the fall, we gave that dominion, that honor, that gift over to Satan. So when Satan offers Jesus, it's not an empty offer. And ultimately, what Satan offers Jesus is what Jesus came to do, and that's establish a kingdom. But what Satan offered Jesus was a change in identity, was a shift in who he is. What he was offering Jesus was a kingdom without a cross. And the moment that Jesus would seize the kingdom by bypassing the cross is the moment he would be someone different. It's the same temptation that we see two other times in Matthew's gospel. Matthew chapter 16, Jesus asked the question to the disciples, who do people say that I am? Verse 13. They replied, some John the Baptist, some say Elijah, still others say Jeremiah or one of the prophets. Jesus says, all right, who do you say that I am? And Peter says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus replied, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood. This was revealed to you by my Father in heaven. In other words, Peter, you got it right. You got my identity right. And because you got it right, he says, you are no longer Peter, or you are no longer called Simon, you are now called Peter. And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. At this point, there's celebration. I mean, Jesus' identity has been solidified. And because of that identity revelation, verse 21 happens. It says, from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day raised to life. In other words, his identity is attached to the cross. His identity is attached to the sacrifice. Peter, well done in saying who I am, that I am the Christ, the Son of the living God. Let me tell you who the Christ, the Son of the living God is. He is the one that will be handed over, that will suffer many things, that will die and raise from the dead. Then verse 22, Peter took Jesus aside and rebuked him. Never, Lord, this shall never happen to you, for you will be a king, Christ, without a cross. Hear the temptation? If you don't hear it, Jesus' response reminds you, we've seen this temptation before. For Jesus turned to Peter in verse 23 and said, Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. In other words, if I took your path, I would cease to be the Christ that I've come to be. My identity would shift. I would no longer be who I am. For Christ has come to bear the cross. Satan tempts Jesus with this same thing one last time. As he is hanging on the cross. Chapter 27 of Matthew's Gospel. It says this, after he's already been crucified, after he's already carried the cross up, and Simon of Cyrene helps him, it says in verse 38, 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right, one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself." Do you hear the temptation? Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God. In other words, they're putting Jesus in this quandary. We will believe you are the Son of God if you come down from the cross. But here's the problem. If he comes down from the cross, he is no longer the same Son of God. Verse 41, in the same way the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders mocked him. He saved others, they said, but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross, and then we will believe him. If Jesus would have come down from the cross, he would cease to be the Christ worthy to believe in. You see, Satan is shrewd. He appears full front, going right at Jesus in chapter 4, attacking him by trying to get him to change his identity, to be a king of a kingdom without a cross, but Jesus refused to protect himself. In Matthew chapter 16, the identity of Jesus once again is identified, is actually brought forward. You are the Christ, the King, the Son of the living God. And Peter takes up the helm of Satan's temptation, tempting him to be a Christ without a cross. Jesus identifies and says, "Get behind me, Satan. I've seen this before." And then as he's hanging on the cross, he once again is tempted by those that are insulting him, those naysayers that actually are tempting Jesus by saying, "We will believe in you if you can come down from the cross, if you deny who you are." But as you know, the only time that Jesus comes down to the cross is after he's finished his last breath. After he says tetelestai. And after ultimately he secures the kingdom that Satan was trying to tempt him with. Here's the thought for the week. If Satan was going to attack you the same way that he attacked Jesus, he would attack your identity. He would tempt you with actions that maybe even are after things that are good and pure and holy. But the moment that you would do them, you would cease to be who it is that God has made you to be. The question I want you to wrestle with this week is, who am I? And how is Satan tempting me to become someone different? I love you guys. Have a good week.